Hey y'all, I'm Lauren and welcome to Cantina Cast. Today is the release of the Return of the Jedi from a Certain Point of View short story anthology. I've previously released a video where I was talking more about my impressions of the collection as a whole, especially as compared with other From a Certain Point of View collections that have come out. In honor of this collection's release, I wanted to talk more specifically about one of my favorite stories, probably my favorite story from it, which I definitely also think is the most impactful one. And I do want to do a couple of videos about some of the more notable stories in the collection. Just so that way I kind of get a chance to talk a little bit more about some of the really great stuff that was in here in a little bit more depth. Because if I tried to do them all in one video, it would probably be a completely unreasonable length. I know I can go on for a long time about some of these stories, especially when I'm really excited about something. So I want to do a couple videos where I'm talking about my faves, just so that way I can give some of these stories the attention that they deserve. So today I'm going to talk about Brotherhood by Mike Chen, and I chose this one because it personally probably was my favorite, although a lot of the Ewok stuff was a close second, of course. In addition to it being my favorite, I also felt like it was really impactful in terms of what it was saying about the story as a whole, and Anakin's story specifically. I also know that this story was really anticipated by a lot of people. I mean, Anakin is a lot of people's favorite character. Mike Chen is a great writer. There were a lot of reasons to get excited about this story, so I feel like this one's a good one to talk about first. I do want to say some more general stuff about Mike Chen as an author. So Mike Chen wrote Brotherhood as well, which is the same title of this short story, but Brotherhood is a novel that came out back in 2022. And this novel covers Obi-Wan and Anakin during a mission that takes place during the Clone War. That quote from Revenge of the Sith where Obi-Wan says that business on Cato Nemoidia doesn't count, that's the situation that that novel covers. In addition to that on its own being a great novel, Mike Chen just really understands Anakin as a character in a very deep way. He wrote, not only did he write that novel, but he also wrote Disturbance, which was another short story from the Empire Strikes Back edition of A Certain Point of View. And just based on how much he's written about Anakin and just the in-depth analysis and detail that his writing gets when it comes to Anakin specifically is, I find it really, really impressive, because you can just tell that this author understands this character on a very deep level. And I feel like that's really saying something, because Anakin is one of the most complex characters in Star Wars. I mean, you love him, you hate him, you got all these emotions tied up with him. Like, I feel like to understand Anakin on a really deep level is really saying something, and being able to convey that through your writing is a big deal. So Mike Chen has my trust for that reason. So it makes total sense that he would be the one to write this type of a story for Anakin in this collection. And what this story covers is the moment that Darth Vader dies and Anakin Skywalker passes into the Force. And so this story does get a little bit more deep into what exactly happened during those moments. This is a pretty short story, a short story. It doesn't cover like that much of a length of time. It really just covers that final scene in Return of the Jedi of Anakin and Luke speaking, and then it goes a little bit after that. But at this point, I am going to start talking spoilers now. So if you don't want spoilers for this short story, if you want to read it on your own and find all that stuff out during your read, now is your time to turn back. But where this short story starts is it begins with Darth Vader is dying. We see the moment when Vader dies and only Anakin remains. I found that to be a really cool illustration of how a lot of times Anakin and Vader are considered two different people. Once Anakin makes the transformation into Vader, the story goes that Anakin Skywalker has died, or at least the story according to Vader himself, and only Vader remains. And this is something that, you know, is said multiple times in Star Wars storytelling. I thought it was cool to see that parallel here of once Vader actually passes, the personality and the, I guess, like the actual armor metaphor, that metaphorical armor of Vader kind of just like dissolves, and Anakin is what is left beneath that. And in this story, Mike Chen does bring up the sun dragon metaphor again, which is a Tatooine bedtime story about the sun dragon that guards the star and has like a heart of fire. And this is a metaphor that comes up in the Brotherhood novel. And this metaphor, the cool thing about this is it was started in the Revenge of the Sith novelization. That novelization was written by Matthew Stover, so it's a different writer, but I really think it's cool how Mike Chen carried that metaphor forward into telling other stories taking place at other parts in Anakin's life. So it's cool to kind of follow that metaphor through all of these different versions of what's going on with Anakin. But once Vader dies and Anakin is in the one with the Force at this point, we do have a moment where he's having flashbacks of some of the important people in his life and things that they said to him that he found encouraging or meaningful in that moment. And he's left with the overwhelming feeling of, I have committed such horrible atrocities. I cannot have my life end like this. This can't be the legacy that I leave. Like, this can't be it for me. I worked so hard. I fought so hard. I failed really hard. And I don't want that to be the end. Like, I can't leave it on that kind of a note. And so Anakin really has a very strong will to try to stick around and not fully pass into the Force. And this is where that question that has often come up of how did Anakin learn how to be a Force ghost? This is kind of how that starts to be addressed in this story. It's established in other points in Star Wars canon that in order to become a Force ghost, it's not something that just automatically happens. It's a skill that you have to learn during life. Qui-Gon was the first one who learned how to do it, who taught Yoda and Obi-Wan, and that's why they were able to do it. But that never answered the question of how did Anakin learn. And so people have speculated like different reasons that Anakin could be a Force ghost. And the way that I've always kind of explained it to myself, and some people agree with this, some people don't, but the way that I've explained it to myself is because Anakin had such a strong sense of unfinished business, that's how he was able to still be a Force ghost even without learning the specific skills. I never really had an explanation for myself as to how exactly like that worked. I just felt like that was the reason, like because he had things that he had to resolve, because he died with a lot of baggage, more baggage than most other Jedi died with. I felt like that was the reason that somehow he was able to figure it out after death. And I feel like based on this story, Mike Chen was kind of thinking the same thing because the way that this kind of gets kicked off is it's Anakin's pure will of being like, this cannot be the end. But that's not the only thing that does it. So once Anakin is having this feeling, Obi-Wan appears and starts speaking to him, and they're talking about the lessons that Anakin learned, the hardships that Anakin endured in life, and how everything that Anakin went through is what brought balance to the Force and what brought him to this moment. And this conversation between Obi-Wan and Anakin is really, really beautiful. It's very moving to read, so I really am not doing it justice in my summary. I recommend just reading it yourself because if I was to try to highlight like one or two quotes from it, I would just end up reading off the whole conversation, and it's better if you just read it yourself. And so through this conversation and through what Obi-Wan is showing Anakin, I got the impression that Obi-Wan is what helped Anakin learn how to finish making that sort of transition from just being part of the cosmic force into retaining that selfhood aspect and being able to manifest into a Force ghost form. So since Obi-Wan had already learned how to do it, had kind of already paved the way, he was able to kind of help Anakin finish that process of materializing into that Force ghost form. This isn't said explicitly in the story. It really is just Mike Chen describing what's happening, and the reader's kind of left to put the pieces together themselves, which I do appreciate when that's left up to the reader's interpretation to actually put the pieces together. But I feel like that was kind of like what Mike Chen was setting up based on my reading of it. And so we do see on the page the moment where Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yoda materialize onto Endor, and they see the celebration that's going on after the Empire's defeated. And we do see the moment where Anakin sees Luke and Leia for the last time. And seeing this go on and seeing how, despite all of the horrible things that Anakin did in life, this was able to, this joy and this good stuff and everybody working together was still able to prevail and survive despite all of that. That brings him a lot of peace to see that. The way that this story ends is Anakin finally has a moment where he's able to actually let go and stop holding on so tightly to trying to make everything right as he did in life. And so the last line is, finally Anakin Skywalker let go. And the way that that line read to me was, it almost sounded like he was kind of accepting being part of the cosmic force and sort of like letting go of his identity of Anakin Skywalker. But we know, based on the novel Shadow of the Sith, we know that this is not the last time that we see Anakin Force Ghost form. So I'm wondering if this kind of means that, like, there's a way for them to kind of go in and out of this form, and maybe it's not like a super permanent form, or it's something that they can change at will depending on the needs of the situation. Because in Shadow of the Sith, when we see Force Ghost Anakin, there's a reason for it. There's something that he needs to convey to Luke. It's not just a random occurrence. So that was just kind of some things that I was thinking about based on that last line of just kind of like, what does this mean about Anakin's Force Ghost? Like, are there other times in canon where we might see the Force Ghost form of Anakin come up whenever there's some specific information that needs to be conveyed? I know that I personally am hoping that we see Anakin's Force Ghost form in the Ahsoka series. So, I mean, who knows if that's actually going to happen. I just hope that it does. But yeah, I really liked how this story kind of got me thinking about Anakin's legacy, got me thinking about what he wanted to leave the galaxy with before he fully passed on into the Force. And I liked how it did kind of give us an explanation of how exactly he was able to achieve that form without studying under Qui-Gon about it. So for that reason, I found this story to be one of the most powerful in this collection. But let me know in the comments what you thought of this story if you read it, especially if you feel like it's kind of in line, or if it's not in line with your own interpretation of how Anakin was able to maintain that Force Ghost form. I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts on this, because I know that it is something that people have kind of been speculating on for a while and trying to come to an answer about, and some people have different theories. So I'm interested to hear like what you think of Mike Chen's version of this. But thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, y'all.